It is 6 o'clock. It's Tuesday evening, March 14, 2023. I'd like to call this City Council meeting of the City of Montgomery into session at this time. It's good to see everyone here, and thank you to those tuning in. Appreciate your interest in our city. I'd like to ask you to silence cell phones to avoid any interruptions in our meeting as we proceed. And we do have a quorum with all members present. And so with that, I'd invite you to join us in the invocation and the pledge to our flags. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the blessings we see every day. Thank you for having your hand of favor upon this city and blessing us in so many ways. As we proceed forth, we need your wisdom. We want your influence in our families, in our institutions, and in this council meeting today. Guide and direct us in ways of prudence and wisdom, and we just ask that your presence be with us. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Salute to the American flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To the Texas flag.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, to Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
We have no one signed up to speak, is that correct? All right. Okay, under announcements, item number 1, presentation of a proclamation to Karis Clammer from the Montgomery High School celebrating Theater in Our Schools Month. If you would join me here at the front. Karis sent me an email, and I said, that sounds good to me. I've raised in the sports environment, but also in fine arts, so I have appreciation for arts and certainly what you do especially. So thank you for reaching out. Whereas theater education enriches the lives of countless students in our schools and allows them to discover skills in leadership, communication, and collaboration. And whereas theater education has been linked to higher levels of academic achievement across the curriculum, this pathway for students going into art careers helps provide them with motivation to stay in school and develop self-discipline. And whereas theater is a critical component of the learning process and development of creativity, problem solving, and critical thinking abilities, and whereas theater in our schools month is an opportunity for our community to engage in the process of theater education and to bring awareness of the importance of the arts education. Now, I, Byron Sanford, Mayor of the City of Montgomery, Texas, do hereby proclaim March 2023 as Theater in Our Schools Month in the City of Montgomery, Texas.
Karis and March around. Okay, thank you.
That's what this side. Sure. Go ahead.
So as Mayor Sanford said, my name is Karis Clammer. I'm a senior at Montgomery High School, and for the past few years I've been given the opportunity to be a state thespian officer for the Texas thespian organizations. So my job this year was to serve as chair, and with that responsibility we have two main goals that the state thespian officers, or STOs, do. We first host, run, and attend the Texas Thespian State Festival, which is an annual conference where all high school thespians get to come together and learn about theater. We get to see shows and attend workshops by drama professionals, as well as compete in different IE events. That happens in November, and this year we had to split into two conferences that had 10 to 12,000 high school thespian attendees around the state of Texas. And then our second job is to advocate for theater education in the state of Texas. So this begins with getting Theater in Our Schools Month declared, and this is a month where we celebrate the arts. We celebrate theater education in our schools because theater is so much more than just storytelling, even though that is the reason why people usually get into it. but it also is a way to improve your academics. The College Board proved that in 2015, students who were involved in the arts scored on average 92 points higher on their SAT scores, as well as on their ACT scores as well. So it's just an amazing way that we get to advocate and do this. And I would really like to thank Montgomery County for giving me this opportunity. It means so much to me that my small town is able to hear and do these kinds of things, especially for a student leader. So thank you all very much for this opportunity.
I think we can tell she's a trained thespian. All right, item number 2, announcement of the official commercial and residential winners of our Texas Independence Celebration Contest. Good evening, everyone. March the 2nd was Texas Independence Day. To celebrate it, we held a Texas Independence Celebration competition with our local businesses and residents, bringing out the Texas spirit into town. Let's see who the winners are. For our residential winners, we have in 3rd place, this is not rigged, John and Cheryl Fox at 821 Stewart Street.
Get out of town.
No, evidently they want you to stay in town.
Okay.
2nd place, Lisa Martin at 604 Worsham Street. And 1st place, Megan and Levi Tuttle in my neighborhood at 203 Brox Lane with an amazing Garage Texas flag. That's the residential. Now for the commercial winner, we have in 3rd place, A&A Plants. 2nd place is Old Montgomery Steakhouse. And 1st place, Slice of Amish, with lots of detailed decorations. Thanks to everyone who participated. The winners will receive their prizes by mail. We hope more of you can join next year. Happy Texas Independence Day. Thank you, staff, for that.
Yeah.
All right. Under the consent agenda, item number 3, approval of the regular city council meeting minutes of February 28, 2023. Do I have a motion or questions?
Make a motion to accept to approve the meeting minutes from February 28th.
I'll second.
Motion by Casey, second by Carol. The motion is debatable, amendable, requires majority vote. All in favor of approving consent agenda item 3, business minutes of February 28th, say yes.
Yes.
Anyone opposed, say no, and we will approve item number 3. Zoning Board of Adjustment, item 4, consideration and possible action by the City Council acting as the Zoning Board of Adjustment on a variance request to section 98-286 of the City Code of Ordinances related to off-street parking requirements as submitted by MISD for a proposed 33.8 acre CTE and agricultural center school facility located at Lone Star Parkway west of Buffalo Springs Drive.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll defer this item to our Assistant City Administrator, Mr. McCorkadell.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You have the information in front of you. The thrust of the request is the design team for the new campus that's building along Lone Star Parkway, next to the Town Creek crossing. They're asking for 130 fewer spaces than what's allowed by ordinance. They are proposing 685 spaces instead of the 815. There is a member of the design team here. If you have any detailed questions, staff has no objection to it. Recommends approval.
Do we have a reason for the shrinking of it?
My name is Brendan Hoffman. I'm with Huckabee Architects. We are the architects working on the CTE Ag Center. We've done a few other schools around the area. The reason for the way that your ordinance works is based on a percentage of square footage that's based on human occupancy. For the Ag Center, there aren't going to be a lot of human occupants necessarily. There will be a lot of students managing those animals. However, they'll be at different hours of the day. The school is also not a fully occupied space. The CTE Center isn't fully occupied at all hours of the day, nor is it occupied consistently with driving students. So the school doesn't necessarily need as many spaces that would be a normal occupied building at all hours of the day. So the request is simply based on the number of spaces that, in our experience doing this, how many spaces will actually be used and needed in order to accommodate those students.
Is there any foresight of events being taking place there?
Yes, sir. So if there's a ag show or if there is an event, most of the time those are after hours where students won't be in the building, there won't be dual use of the ag barn and the CTE center for dual events at the same time. It would be an ag show or a CTE use. There are a lot of uses for a CTE center, so
Okay.
That's the only concern that I had heard before is what about special events and, you know, on a regular day-to-day, we didn't see any problem with it that I heard of. So if that answers people's questions, if there's anything else council has, we certainly are glad to have that facility right there. It's handy, it's awesome. It's a good deal. Do I have any more questions? If not, a motion?
I make the motion to consider possible action by the City Council acting as a zoning board of adjustments on a variance request to Section 98-286 of the City Code of Ordinance related to off-street parking requirements as submitted by MISD for the proposed 33.8 acres CTE and agricultural center for the school, located on Lone Star Parkway west of Buffalo Springs Drive.
We have a motion by Cheryl to approve item 4 as presented. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second is by Pat. The motion is debatable, amendable, requires majority vote. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving item 4 as presented, say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, say no. And the motion carries. We will approve. Thank you. Item 5, consideration and possible action by the City Council acting as the zoning board of adjustment on an existing encroachment variance request to Section 98-239 of the City Code of Ordinances related to rear yard requirements as submitted by Cornerstone Community Church located at 14740 Liberty Street.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. McCorkdale.
Mayor and council, when the Cornerstone Community Church moved into the old China Chapel site about a year or a year and a half ago, they recently acquired about half an acre to the south. They want to plat that all as one. The property was never platted in the past. The building has been there probably since the early 1980s. The current building that's there. When the surveyor was out doing the survey work, there was a less than 1 foot encroachment by about 5 or 6 feet long of the back porch that has been there since the building was built. That said, it still comes up as an encroachment on the plat when the engineers are looking at it. So what this action would do would be to allow or approve the encroachment so they don't have to shave off a third of their back porch to remain compliant. By leaving the building line at the 25 feet and the rear vegetative setback at 25 feet in future buildings would still need to be at 25 foot, which is why we're asking to approve the encroachment rather than a reduction in the building line.
I thought it was just the awning that was actually encroaching, but it's a porch.
It's not the building itself, and if it's less than a foot, it's the eve of the building
Okay.
that's overhanging that 25 foot. We haven't answered any questions or comments.
I'll make a motion to approve the encroachment as presented.
Second.
Motion by Carol, second by Casey. Motion is debatable, amendable, requires majority vote. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of approving item 5 as presented, say yes.
Yes.
Anyone opposed, say no. And the motion carries. Consideration possible action, item 6, consideration possible action on an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Montgomery, Texas, amending Chapter 82, taxation of the City Code of Ordinances to add Article 6, partial ad valorem tax exemption for historically significant structures, making findings and containing other provisions related to the foregoing subject, containing a savings clause providing for severability.
We talked about this item a few weeks ago where we kind of introduced the idea, explained that there was one property in the city that had received a 25% partial ad valorem tax exemption, and that was Eagle College, which is where Mr. Frank lives, and you guys heard from last time. So we have put together an ordinance and are recommending the 25% partial ad valorem tax. You see the criteria there on the summary sheet, which is the home is at least 100 years old. Well, back up one step. It's only applies to a residential home. So this wouldn't apply to a commercial structure or anything. So the home must be 100 years old, must have been located in the city for at least 25 years. The home, there are some guidelines that the home has to be kept in good repair and some provisions for it. The home were demolished and not rebuilt. The idea behind the approval and verification process is to use the existing framework that we have. If someone wants to be a historic landmark, we already have that in our historic preservation ordinance. They can go through that process. But in terms of the verification, it would be done at a staff level as opposed to, just like their homestead is essentially done, where everyone who wants a homestead or who qualifies for a homestead exemption doesn't have to come for city council action. You guys set the framework, and the folks on staff, either here or in this case here and at the appraisal district, would do the work of implementing or getting the right paperwork in place to get the exemption. So staff recommends approval of the ordinance. You have to answer any thoughts or questions that you have on it.
How many houses do you actually think in the city of Montgomery would qualify for this exemption?
My estimation is about 15 or so. Right now, given what we have right now today, that's either in the historic district or it's a historic landmark that's designated by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Certainly, there's a handful of them that could pass to be historic landmarks that would probably be able to meet the criteria for that type of designation by the Planning and Zoning Board and ultimately by you guys. In other words, the way the process is the P&Z would recommend, as with any other zoning change, they would recommend that, so here's the property, we studied it, and here's the information, and we recommend that it be added to the list of historic landmarks in the city. You guys would ultimately approve that. Based on the number of homes and just a general valuation of the homes, I would estimate about a $13,000 to $15,000 abatement in taxes. Given what we have today.
So the homes will not be required to have a historic landmark, or are they, that is a requirement?
So a city designated historic landmark does not have necessarily have a plaque on it. An example would be, I believe it's 415 Houston Street. I don't know the whole history of it. It's the home just behind the post office. There's no state historical designation on it. But it is a city designated historic landmark because of the importance of the home and style of architecture, to the city. I wasn't around when it was designated historic landmark, or I was, but I was about a year into it, and I don't remember. So, but a city designated historic landmark differs from a state, designation where you get the plaque on the home. And with the city designated historic landmarks, very likely it was something that the city felt like it rises to the level of significance for the city. The state, may not feel that it, rises to the level of the state designated historic landmark. That said, there are cities with ordinances for this type of thing. They do require the state designation. So if that's something that you guys want to consider, being a part of it, that can certainly be done. It's certainly something that you could add. My sense is,
All things considered, it wouldn't, the ebb and flow of things wouldn't go any higher than ad valorem 18,000 roughly.
right, if we made it where only a state historic marker were on the house, the number from 15 would probably drop down to 2 or 3.
Gotcha.
There's not very many of those in the city hall.
Right.
All right.
So I just want to thank you for writing it to include other homes so that they're not all coming in and hoping and wondering, and I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Is the list of the designated landmarks, is that a piece of our zoning ordinance?
This name shows up on the zoning map. It's just
Okay.
It's the
I
same
couldn't
kind of
remember.
patch, it's just a different color from the district.
Okay. But you have a list of all of those?
Yes, ma'am. And there's some that are just open property.
Right.
To use an example, right next to you,
Yes.
the other piece that's up, that would not qualify. It's not a single family home on the property that's, that we're trying to save. So, or encourage the preservation of.
Right.
Kind of concerned about the preservation too, because there's a particular house here in town that they did take the original door off. So yeah, there's no way that you can actually regulate that. I don't imagine, but I think for what you've written, it looks like it covers a lot of bases for sure.
Do they have to fill out this application every year?
Yes, ma'am. And that's not an our requirement, that's a county
Right.
appraisal district or tax office requirement. So every year, they would have to fill out that application, and it would come to us. We would look and then verify, hey, okay, nothing's changed, the house is still there, you still meet this exemption. They would get a letter signed by the city administrator stating that, that we authorize that, that it's to receive that Texas tax code says that it's an annual application that they have to make on.
Have you had any other inquiries?
I've got a couple.
Good.
I've got a couple that are called in. Again, I've got a few in mind that could be a historic landmark. One of the provisions that I have in here is if to encourage someone to go through with this is they can apply to be a historic landmark, and if they have an application in with the city for that year, that they're eligible for it if they're going through. What we don't want to get into is, well, what if they just submit an application, they get their exemption, and then they pull their application. So we've got it where if you've not applied to be a historic landmark within the past 5 years,
Right.
that we will count that, and we will trust that you are sincere in the application to be a historic landmark. The dollar amount on that, or the risk on that is about $1,000, $1,500 or so, per home. That doesn't seem like a lot of risk. Again, the goal is to encourage the preservation of these homes.
Okay, any further discussion? I'll take a motion to approve item 6.
Make a motion to adopt the ordinance as presented.
Motion's by Casey.
Second.
Seconds by Cheryl. Motion's debatable, amendable, requires majority vote. No further discussion. All in favor of approving item 6 as stated, say yes.
Yes.
Anyone opposed, say no. And we will approve item 6 as stated. Gary and Alan, since we have on the subject line a different verbiage, should I read that amended version than the take action part of item 7?
Are you talking about the memo,
On the
the Joe
agenda.
Street, my memo, and the memo
Your
from Mr.
memo, can I
Corkadell?
read off of this, or do I need to read?
You can read the original memo. I'll have a
Okay.
recommendation following that.
All right, so item 7, consideration and possible action on amendment number 1 to the development agreement between the City of Montgomery and Redbird Meadow Development LLC, development number 2206.
Thank you, Mayor. You should have, the council should have a memo in front of them from me, kind of outlining the developer's requests and some questions on the bottom that we should probably delve into. We're requesting, or I'm requesting this be discussion only tonight. This typically would be a workshop item where we would bring this to the council with the applicant, allow the applicant to present. Council could ask questions, anybody else in the meeting could ask questions, then we would take that information back, digest it, come up with a recommendation, bring it back for formal action. Since we don't have workshops, for me, it's important for us to really understand what we're looking at and considering. I'm certainly not ready to make an affirmative recommendation on this proposed amendment. I don't know how y'all feel, but my request is that we do discussion only tonight. But to take advantage of that time, the developer and his team is here. We can allow them to make their proposal to y'all. We'll take a lot of notes. And then we can come back at a later date when we're ready to bring this to y'all for consideration.
Thank you for that. I think that helps the process quite a bit.
Yeah, so I'll defer to Mr. Sen and his team.
Take the podium. Thank you all very much. Here we go. One or two. All right, thank you all very much. We have had extensive meetings with your city engineer and your planning department and your city manager about this subject. My name is Annette Stevens.
Not me.
Not you, though, I know.
Okay, so the prior city administrator.
Exactly. Sorry, I misspoke. We entered into, my name is Annette Stevens with ABA Journal. We've got LJA here, Micah, and Perry Sen from the development team. Just as a way of background, for those of you all that were not here last year, we entered into a development company entered into a development agreement with the city back in May of 2022. Perry and his team owned approximately a 388-acre tract that at the time, partially in the city limits, partially in the ETJ, partially in the county. As part of our development of the tract, the city annexed that tract into its corporate limits. We entered into a development agreement with the city and agreed to work with the city engineer to install water line, sewer line to serve the tract, developers fronting the money, as well as other development considerations. The city at the time consented to the creation of a municipal utility district, would provide the means to finance the infrastructure for the tract. The TCQ has since approved the creation of that district, and the developer is ready to commence its development plans. As the engineers were working together, there were a number of planning and phasing modifications that were requested, and your city staff thought it would be a good idea for us to compile those requested changes into a development agreement amendment and present it to council and let you all kind of consider it as a whole. We can certainly kind of run through those quickly. If any of y'all would like to ask any questions from engineer and developer, we're here to answer any questions as we go along. So meant to be a dialogue. Feel free to intersperse. I'm going to introduce Micah to go through some of the changes that are proposed, minor changes as to phasing and lot size. And Perry is here from the development team to answer any questions you all might have as to the overall development. I think Perry generally would definitely explain that the overall development has not changed. The overall percentage of lot sizes has modified slightly, but in general, we're in compliance with the original terms of development agreement. So, Micah, if you want to go into some of the minor changes that we wanted to bring in front of the council.
Yeah, okay, so Micah Crackfire, LJA Engineering. So some of the four main highlights that you guys saw here, on the city administrator's memo, there was the 22% increase in number of lots. Obviously, the same number increase for flows and water and sanitary as well. The main reason for that increase, I guess, is more before it was, I could remember all those 60s, 85s, and 115-foot size lots. Which was market change in this past year, those larger lots started going. It was high demand they were doing before, areas going into this development. So it kind of changed towards 60s, 70s, and 80s. The agreement stayed the same. I think in the agreement it was 47% or less was to be 60-foot lots, or still less than 35% being 60-foot lots. 70s and 80s are still planned, and things could change in phase 2 and 3. 3, 4, 5 years from now, when those bigger lots are become a higher priority, he's got the ability to upsize the lots again and the size of the lots in future phases. As far as the first phase of the agreement, we're still staying in that first threshold that the city's already planned on for their current expansion or extension of water line and sanitary force main. The city's been notified as far as within the next 2 years of surpassing that number. And so I think past city council meetings out there approved the budget for designing those expansions of facilities. So that's kind of the rest of that one. The other kind of line item going forward good, the minimum width of pavement. The city minimum width right now is 28 feet. All throughout Montgomery County, 22 foot is minimum. 24 is widely used in a lot of master communities. It's a 24 foot back-to-back with a roller curb. So the curb is still drivable. It's 4-inch wide, 12-inch wide. So no issues with fire. We've already reached out to our local ESD. Got an email from them saying no issue. As far as Brian Cross, Fire Marshal of Montgomery County, he never puts in writing, always requests by writing email. But every single time I've done this for the numerous counties or communities throughout Montgomery County, he always calls, does a phone call, hey, no objection, as long as the governing entity has no objection. So beyond that, those are kind of the main changes that were requested on this amendment.
I was on the council from pretty much the beginning of this, and very excited about 580 homes up to half-acre lots. Projected that out ad valorem somewhere around 1.2, 1.4 million. Can you speak to how these changes would change that? And then the biggest question I see here is the issue of internal density. You spoke about the width of the roads. I drove it again today, and when somebody comes, I'm off the edge, and I think Casey mentioned that before too. So there is, it may be 28 feet, but for trucks, it's very minimal there. And with the extra density, 682 compared to, that's a full 100 more, homesteads, more cars internal, external. And I know that was huge concern for people who live out there, that the amount of traffic there, and would it hold up to what's there? Could you address the ad valorem and the density issue?
Barry, you want to talk about the total value in the district? Yeah, why don't you talk about the increase in value is going to be there, and also he wants to talk about paving width size. Barry's
I think what we've done is try to eliminate where we can. I think we had a meeting with the Commissioner Walker, relative to a thoroughfare that went through our community, and he was adamant that they didn't want that. And so the wider the street, the more traffic you're going to get, and it's going to be a traffic hazard. We're going to have a lot of trails in the community, parks, a lot of things like that, and we're trying to eliminate any through traffic that's possible. We've even deferred the 70-foot right-of-way to 37-foot wide road that goes from the east side all the way to the west side of Spring Branch until phase 3, just to eliminate people cutting through. We know they're going to try to find a faster route, but that creates traffic hazards and safety hazards for our community. Right now we have 680 home sites. We can't exceed that. We have an average lot width of 70 feet. Our home values will average in the 550, 600 range. We estimate an overall assessed value of over $450 million for the city. It's going to be a really nice community. If you've been through the wood forest, it's something going to be very similar to that without the commercial. We will not have any commercial in our community. It's 100% residential, 100% single family. We'll have a rec center, we'll have lakes, we have beautiful lakes, by the way. We'll have amenities on the water, we'll have parks, trails, a lot of landscaping and open space in our community. I think right now we have roughly 70 acres of lakes, parks, and open space. That's a lot out of 380 acres. I think it'll be, first of all, it'll be highly restricted. We have not put our CCRs together yet. We're waiting on the final plans, but it will be highly restricted. But I encourage you to help us with some of these roadways. They're about smaller streets with maybe 10 or 12 lots on it. We simply just don't need a 28-foot wide road. I think if you have those in those areas, people are going to be more prone to park on the street than they are in their driveway, which we will encourage. Once again, we're the owners. We're going to manage this property, just like all the other properties that we've done, over 30 of them in Harris County and Montgomery County. We're very pleased with what we've developed and what we brought to the city, and we know it'll be a really appreciated project once we're finished.
Mayor, did that answer your question?
Everything, but just how do we factor in that ad valorem difference?
Well, I can't remember exactly so the ad valorem, he's asking an ad valorem difference in the previous.
Yeah, we were looking at 500, I was just doing simple math, 580 homes, average 560,000. Today's cost, that's probably $1 million, who knows? But, how do we compare what we had and what we thought we had with what we might get? How do we figure that?
Sure. Well, I think all that we can do is project what, I think Perry's been talking about the projected values. You've been talking to builders, talking to see what the market is like.
I'll just give you a base price range for every product. 60s are probably going to be in the 450,
Okay.
450 to 550. The 70s will probably be from 550 to 7, and the 80-foot product will be over 700.
That helps. That helps to understand it at least.
Yeah, and I think obviously this will be done in phases, Mayor, so, we'll have a better idea as the development progresses. Always, the hope is
At this point,
more higher
we
product.
can't add any more 60s, because if we do, we reduce our average width to 70. So we're pretty well maxed out on what we can build 60s.
So of the 122 residential lots that you're adding, none of them are 60?
No, they are. There's a portion that's 60.
Yeah, exactly.
Of the 122 lots we're adding, how many of those are 60s? I don't know quite how the mix changes.
Yes, out of the 680 homes, there's roughly 235 total that are 60-foot lots. About 217 that are the 70s and the 228 that are the 80s. And it's only if we keep the 60, 70. Again, there's the possibility down the road, lot sizes increasing in phases 2 and 3.
What is the total of the,
I'd like to refresh the council's memory. We originally were building 85 and 110 lots. And we came to the council to request a change simply because the market changed. If that market comes back, we're not against, and the demand may tell us that we need more larger lots. So for sections, the only thing we have in concrete today is phase 1A and 1B. That's it.
on 1A and 1B?
If we need bigger lots, we can do that.
Sorry.
On 1A and 1B phase, how many are 60-foot lots, and how many houses are on 60-foot lots?
Can you answer that one?
So phase 1A and 1B, 60-foot lots are 100.
How many?
70s are 96, and 80s are 90.
So the majority of them are the smaller.
Well,
Yeah, it's about 37%.
yeah.
So still less than the 47 that was in the agreement.
And how will the smaller streets impact emergency services, or will it impact emergency services?
Yeah, and we've had, I mean, I live very close to another community, so I was City of Conroe, but Woodlands Hills, it's same thing, 24-foot wide roads. Had a fire on one of the cul-de-sacs, so even the cul-de-sacs, they had, that community had islands, you know, vegetated treed islands, and those fire trucks had no issue getting around that cul-de-sac island and coming in and putting out that fire. Brian Cross, the fire marshal, he's, you know, they've come across this on multiple master plan communities. And again, Wood Forest, for example, has 22-foot line around cul-de-sacs, so even skinnier. They still, for the last, since 2005, have any issues in any emergencies situation in those communities. Another thing too, just with, you know, perception-wise, maybe me personally, but when the road is skinnier, you tend to drive slower, regardless of what speed limit is. And once you get to 28, heck, even 39-foot wide roads, you know, just to get more freedom, those are when people are going to fly by with a little bit quicker. So trying to restrict that to not allow for the excessive speeding that tends to happen.
But you've reached out to the fire marshal.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, and they were.
So are you going to have like the wood forest or whatever that is down there, the roundabouts also?
Don't know if you finalize that one, but yeah, we've got those cul-de-sac islands, no traffic.
Because down there, I've drove those streets. I haven't up at Willis, I haven't Woodlands Hills, but I found them to be very intimidating. They're way too small to be driving safely.
Those are 2 foot skinnier. So we're not trying to be that skinny.
I'm not a fan of those.
Yeah.
Mayor, to answer your question on the tax of the valve, so when the feasibility study was done back in 2020, it was projected 517 homes at $500,000 a piece, which was an estimated valuation of $258 million, which was about $982,000 in tax revenue, if 100% paid. Based on their new numbers, a $450 million valuation would generate approximately $1.8 million taxes, so 80%.
I wanted to make sure it still had that strength, because I made a lot of good optimistic things happening, and I want to make sure there is that.
Any other questions we can answer from council?
So just to be clear, the way in and the way out, Spring Branch is obviously a whole lot better road than Womack Cemetery, for example. So the way in and out is where, for the grand picture,
Way in and out of the subdivision.
where are we channeling? I know we don't want to channel it to one
We'll
spot.
have 2 entrances, day one. We'll have, both of them will be on Old Commercial Road. We'll have 2. Even though we're going 173 lots in section 1, or phase 1A, we'll still have two access points.
They'll both be on Old Plantersville Road? They'll both be on Old Plantersville Road?
And just as a reminder on Old Plantersville Road, so back, you know, the history that we've been talking about this development and with the county. So there's been a lot of conversations that I mentioned with the commissioners. And the most recent one, there's action items out of that, working on a 3-party agreement that lays out the improvements of Old Plantersville Road. And you know what has been, I think, already determined is the initial phase of development, turn lanes at a minimum, but deferring the full rehab of Old Plantersville until later stages of the development when a lot of the heavy truck traffic has been completed. So we don't, you know, new road is not put down, then you put construction vehicles for a 400-acre development and it breaks down right away. So that is part of this, and that is ongoing conversations with the county for additional right-of-way width on Old Plantersville Road, as well as improvements on Old Plantersville Road.
And just so you know, the developer has paid upfront all of the required engineering fees, design fees to begin design of the central infrastructure that your city engineer has designed. So we're going to.
Let me add one more thing. On the road that Chris was talking about, we did agree, if it was necessary and the city or the county wanted it, we'd put decel lanes in or right turn lane in on Old Plantersville if the traffic demanded that we do so. So we were not mind putting that in, but the main thing that we didn't want to do is redo Old Plantersville Road now, because for the next 3 years, it's going to be nothing but concrete trucks and gravel trucks and sand trucks and construction vehicles. And they'll tear, whatever we build is going to tear it up. So we want to maintain the road so it's accessible, it's a quality road, and if we need to do the decel lane, we can do so. But then, once we get into phase 3, and most of the work is going on the other side of the development, then we could consider doing the road, redo the surfacing on Old Plantersville. And I think the city was in agreement with it, I mean, your engineer, and I know the commissioner was, and the MUD and the developer are in agreement with that as well.
So both entrances will be here.
Gary, do you have any other, council, anything else
I'm
we
good.
can add? Address any other questions or concerns? Well, we appreciate the opportunity
Okay.
to address council, and happy to continue to work with your staff. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 8, consideration possible action on letters of no objection for the proposed Montgomery County MUDs 223 and 227.
Do we do anything about number 7? Or
No,
we just leave it?
information on
Discussion, so no
it, discussion and
action.
information on it.
But the agenda said,
Correct, but the memo that Gary sent amended that.
I mean, you can take action if you want. My recommendation is not to take action.
okay,
So I'll defer to y'all on that one.
Or you could postpone. I'm doing math.
Is council okay? Do you want to take an action or
I'm okay, whatever they said.
on the item? So evidently we could take action, but you're recommending
Take action on
discussion
anything.
because there's just so many changes so fast.
I'd like to make a motion to table it.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion to table item 7. Do we want to set a date? I would recommend give us some time to
I would recommend not setting a date to give us some time to get
Leave it
back
open.
with the,
leave it open.
yeah. I would leave it
All right,
open.
so-
We'll bring it back as soon as we can.
Okay, so we have a motion, Casey, to table. And did we have a second?
Second.
Second is by Cheryl. The motion is debatable, amendable, requires majority vote. All in favor of tabling item 7 until a further date yet to be determined, say yes.
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 Anyone opposed, say no. And we will table item 7. Thank you, Cheryl. Casey. Item 8, consideration possible action on letters of no objection for the proposed Montgomery County MUDs 223 and 227.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to defer to Mr. Brian Leeds, the attorney for the MD.
Sir, council, good evening. Thank y'all for the opportunity to present these two items to you this evening. So we have 2 districts that we are taking to the legislature this session. They're both on this single agenda item, but they're not related properties. I'm sure that both of them, Brian Hayes and of course Major Harding, the attorney that's representing these 2 landowners. So Montgomery County Budget for 223. You may have received some location materials. I know I sent those today, but we'll get on to the council members. The property for Montgomery 223 is around 819 acres. It's Tom Gray's property is here this evening down Spring Branch Road. So we are creating what's known as a template MUD in the legislature with Representative Metcalf and Senator Colcourse. It will have standard MUD powers. It is in the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction. It's not in the city's corporate boundaries. We will be coming back to council for a full consent. At that time, we will have consent conditions that the the city would consider and hopefully approve. This evening, all we're asking for is what's known as a letter of no objection, that the legislatures need to be able to process that the legislation during the very compressed time period that you have for these sessions. We already got started in January. The bills have been introduced, but they're being assigned to committees for hearings and look to have the bills passed before the end of the session at the end of May. So that's the Montgomery County Bud 223. Montgomery County Bud 227 is a little over 500 acre piece. It's around 560 acres. That is owned by the Randall family. We do have representatives here with them as well. So both of these are legacy landowners who have owned property in Montgomery County for a very long time, as I'm sure many of you have. And so we're proud to be able to represent them here this evening and talk to them about these properties. So same deal on 227. We're only asking for a letter of no objection. The letter specifically states that the city is not providing its full consent this evening as part of that letter of no objection, and that you reserve your right to provide consent at a future date with consent conditions. And that's our standard operating procedure for these legislative creations. Happy to demonstrate. But 247, we don't know where the land of property is. They're on 2854 as it starts to swing down to the southeast. And their property is much larger than what's in this mud creation, but the majority of the remainder of the property is in Conroe's ETJ. We did actually go to Conroe for letters of no objection last week, and those were approved for those creations. And a portion of the property that is in Conroe's ETJ. Happy to answer any other questions y'all may have about those two proposed creations at this time.
I drove down Spring Branch Road to see that 223. It's a good ways down there. Any questions? Okay, so this is for letters of no objection and not necessarily approving everything in detail, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does council have a motion?
I make a motion to issue the letter of no objection for MUD 223 and 227.
Motion by Casey. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second is by Carol. The motion is debatable, amendable, requires majority vote. All in favor of approving item 8, MUD districts 223 and 227, say yes.
Yes.
Anyone opposed, say no. And we will approve MUD districts 223 and 227. Thank you, sir. Item number 9, consideration and possible action on acceptance of the sanitary sewer and drainage improvement on Dr. Martin Luther King Drive project, GLO CDBG-DR, contract number 19706-017-B366, sewer facilities.
Thank you, Mayor. Our city engineer, Ms. Vu.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is the sanitary sewer and drainage improvements on Martin Luther King Drive. All of the work is complete. All punch list items have been addressed, and it is time for substantial completion and acceptance of the infrastructure. So that is the action item that is before you. As you will see in the memo that we provided, the warranty period will end on January 11th, 2024. Between now and then, we'll be noting any kind of issues that come up and be presenting them to the contractor. We'll also perform a one-year warranty inspection in January and present a punch list to the contractor at that time to address anything that may come up in this next coming year. Since this is funded by the GLO, this does begin the closeout period for this project.
Question for staff in general, just entering into another warranty period and having some of the discussions we've had before about what if we miss something in the warranty, and it's something that's, you know, hugely was in what they said they did, but they didn't do it. We're still working on having some legal recourse for that. We've talked about that for a while. Are we still working towards that end?
Are you talking about a surety bond or? a
Yeah,
cash
surety
bond?
or some sort of way to say, because we naturally might miss some. I mean, my house warranty, I missed one or two things. But from a city perspective, those things we may miss where subpar materials were used or something wasn't like it was supposed to be, having some sort of, we're still working towards that, right?
Well, we talked about that internally. I believe we do have, we require bonds at this time, performance bonds.
Okay.
For items such as that.
Okay.
I don't know if.
Just want to be
there's
sure
other-
that we do, right?
So this project being a city-driven project, there's performance and payment bonds that the city has on developer-driven projects. At the completion, they put up a maintenance bond that's worth 30% of the value of the improvements. And that, they have a couple options, but typically they do a maintenance bond for that 30% that covers anything that they don't address during the working period. So the city can call it.
Okay.
I just have one question on the north end of both of the ditches that were put in. Was anything ever addressed? I know there's water lines and power lines that are right there next to the road. The water runs both ways on that street, right? So it crowns and runs back both ways. Was anything ever addressed and asked about it, and about the one side, the southeast side, or northeast side, excuse me, where the water just dead ends right in front of the man's house? What was ever done with that?
In front of her house, so there was the swale that was.
No, not in the middle of the ditch, at the north end, where the ditch just stops, right in front of the man's house, and all the water just spills out underneath of his house.
Yes, so the issue is how the road, the limits of what we can construct, especially being a grant project, is limited to what's public right. And in that area, the actual ditch and the culverts are outside of public right of way.
Okay.
So once this project is complete, it's a discussion that we've had internally with staff, and we'll pick back up on what improvements can be done, working with that property owner to get those changes made so that happens. But it's outside of the grant because it is not within the public right of way,
Okay.
based on the survey.
I just don't want, I know we moved the water from running down his driveway, but now it's running under his house,
Right.
so.
What street is that on, Casey?
McGinnis?
That's McGinnis, it's the northwest side, I think. Oh, MLK, isn't it?
On the north.
West side of it, yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Entertain a motion?
Make a motion, to accept the public sewer and drainage infrastructure and begin the one-year warranty period.
Do I have a second? Second is by who? Cheryl?
Pat.
Oh, Pat? Motion by Casey, second by Pat. Motion's debatable, amendable, requires majority vote. No further discussion. All in favor of approving item 9 as presented, say yes.
Yes.
Anyone opposed, say no. And we will approve item 9 as stated. Item 10, consideration possible action on the replat of restricted reserve H2 of the amended plat for Buffalo Springs Shopping Center Phase 2.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Vu.
So this property is what's currently going in as a Popeyes, it's under construction next to Blue Wave. As it currently stands, the Popeyes reserve is one lot, and what's before you is a replat to divide that into 2 properties to allow Dutch Bros to go between Popeyes and Blue Wave. As part of the plat, every property will still maintain access to right-of-way and streets, and will not be impacted by the division into the second lot.
Do we have a construction plan for Dutch Brothers?
We do. So they have submitted plans, and we conditionally approve them subject to recording of this plat. That way they can get started, but they will not receive a certificate of occupancy until this plat is recorded.
So we know how it's supposed to sit on that small, right there?
We do. So the building itself is closer to the street, and then parking is in the back. There is a 2-lane drive-through that goes around the building.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the replat as presented.
Second.
Motion by Carol, second by Casey. Motion's debatable, amendable, requires majority vote. No further discussion. All in favor of approving item 10 as presented, say yes.
Yes.
Anyone opposed, say no. And we'll approve item 10. Calling item 11, calling a public hearing for a rezoning request from R1 Single Family Residential to I Institutional for a .295 acre parcel of land located at 14740 Liberty Street as submitted by Cornerstone Community Church.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. McCorkle.
Mayor and Council, as I mentioned earlier, the Cornerstone Community Church recently bought just about a third of an acre from the property owner to the south. It's currently zoned single-family residential. Since the church acquired it, they're asking to rezone that to be institutional, which is what the rest of their parcel already is. The first step in rezoning action would be to call a public hearing to P&Z. Likewise, at their meeting last week, also called a public hearing for this item, so this will come back to you in a month. If you call a public hearing, it's submitted in January report.
So I just have one question. How does rezoning it affect the properties around it?
Does not affect the properties around it. The properties around it do affect what kind of setbacks are required, which kind of goes back to the planning of it. If there were a commercial property next door, they wouldn't have a 25-foot rear yard and vegetative buffer to the east. So residential properties that are already existing to the east require the subject property to have some tighter controls on it and some additional restrictions, but it doesn't affect the rights or use or enjoyment of the properties that are surrounding. In other words, the rezoning doesn't do anything to the properties around it other than those properties are residential, so they have a higher setback or a further setback than what they would have if they put it up to some type of a commercial use, institutional use.
So there'd be no restrictions on the properties around them whatsoever?
Right. That's not on their property. This wouldn't affect anybody else around them.
Okay.
Okay. We have a motion to set that public hearing.
I'll make a motion to call a public hearing on the rezoning request for April the 11th, 2023 at 6 o'clock.
Second.
Motion by Carol, second by Casey. Motion is debatable, amendable, requires majority vote. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of setting a public hearing for April 11th, 2023 at 6 p.m. All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Anyone opposed, say no. And we will set the public hearing for April 11th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Item 12, consideration and possible action on an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Montgomery, Texas, amending its municipal budget for the fiscal year 2021-22, appropriating the various amounts herein as attached in Exhibit A, containing findings and a Texas Open Meeting Act clause, and providing an immediate effective date. Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor. We're requesting no action again on this item. Talking to the auditor, which is they're wrapping their audit up this week and next week. She wanted to do just a one complete year-end amendment, which would include this amendment, and also she found some things that we need to amend from fiscal year 2022 as well to bring us into compliance before she can complete the audit. So we'll bring this back on the 28th, and also we can use a little bit more time to kind of disentangle some of the things that we're finding from fiscal year 2022, just kind of package it all up and bring it all at once. I apologize for keep bringing this back, but again, I want to bring something to you that's ready for your consideration, which is not ready. So requesting no action.
To be consistent, should we possibly table it then and go ahead and set that date?
I'll defer to the city attorney. For me, I don't think you need to take any action at all. We'll bring it back on the 28th, but if legally you're required to make a motion, if it's on an agenda that
I think it would be best just to be consistent based on what we just did.
I'll defer to him.
You're not legally required to, but it creates a little bit of better paper trail. So we generally do recommend that.
Okay. We kind of merged last year. I remember going to TML. Sometimes you learn too much, I guess. Anyway, and they said if you make a, what's the word? If you postpone it, you should set a date. And so we went down that trail, you know, and I'm just trying to be consistent with that. I don't think it's as much legalities as it may be formalities, but if council wants to entertain a motion to,
If you're going to take action, I just recommend you table it to March 28th.
there you go. Somebody want to make that
I
motion?
make the motion that we table the action until March 28th, 23.
So motion is by Cheryl,
I'll second.
second by Carol to table until March the 28th. The motion is debatable, amendable, requires majority vote. Any further discussion? All in favor of tabling item 12 until March 28th, 2023? All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Anyone opposed, say no. And we will table item 12 until March 28th. Executive session adjourned into closed session in compliance with section 551.000 ETSAQ, Texas Government Code, to wit, section 551.071, consultation with attorney, section 551.072, deliberation regarding real property. It is 7:06 and we are adjourned in executive session. 7:44, and we are back into regular session. And this council inquiry, there is no action, first of all. Council inquiry. If there is none, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn and a second. All in favor say yes,
Yes.
and we are adjourned.